Welcome to the Deep Dive. This is where we cut through all that noise, we sift through the sources, and really pull out those vital nuggets of insight. Our goal, to help you get well-informed and fast. Today, we're plunging into a topic that's, well, not just fascinating, but really critically important for global stability, for economic security. China's rapidly expanding footprint up in the Arctic and also in the burgeoning, often overlooked, deep-sea mining industry. We'll be looking at the potential implications for, global security, economic interests, especially for the United States and its allies. Our mission here is to help you figure out whether activities that seem purely economic or scientific might actually hide a broader strategic agenda.
That's exactly right. The core question, really, that our source material tries to unravel is pretty fundamental. Are China's economic, scientific, information activities in these really crucial resource-rich regions, are they purely innocent? Or do they serve broader, maybe more strategic goals? We're pulling insights from a pretty comprehensive RAND Corporation report, and then we're sort of bolstering that with analyses from places like Frontiers, Paradigm Press, and the Melbourne Law School.
Okay, so let's kick off with the Arctic. For a long time, China's presence up there, it's been seen mostly as benign, right? Focused on science, economic opportunities. I mean, they have a research station in Ny-Ålesund, Svalbard, an observation center in Iceland. They've made big investments in Russian Arctic liquefied natural gas, LNG, plus some, minor mining stuff. On the surface, that just looks like business, doesn't it?
It does, yeah. But that perception, it's changing fast, and concerns have really heightened significantly. What's truly critical to grasp here is China's overall strategy. This deliberate fusion, you could say, of public and private capabilities, basically blurring the lines between civilian and military spheres. We've seen some pretty clear indicators, like joint Russian-Chinese military vessel operations near Alaska, not just once, but twice, September 2022, then again August 2023. And there was also a Coast Guard cooperation agreement signed in April 2023. These aren't just random events. They strongly suggest China's evolving into a security and military actor in the Arctic and getting direct help from Russia. And here's something really concerning. China's third icebreaker, the one under construction now, it isn't just about breaking ice. It's designed to deploy deep-sea mini-submarines.
Mini-subs, yeah.
Yeah, that's a pretty clear signal their Arctic ambitions go way beyond just scientific research.
Okay, wow. Let's unpack this a bit. To really get a handle on China's approach, this RAND Corporation report, it breaks down their Arctic strategy into 5 different areas. The first, maybe the most obvious one, is exploiting natural resources. We're talking everything: oil, gas, critical minerals, pipelines, fishing, even tourism. Now, tourism itself, maybe low risk, but the report flags investments in energy extraction, mining, especially for those critical minerals everyone needs, and large-scale fishing. These carry the strongest potential for military and intelligence risks. Maybe not immediately, but the potential is there.
Right. And if we connect this to the bigger picture, just think about China's past actions. The source points back to 2010. Remember when Beijing temporarily blocked rare earth exports to Japan? That was during a fishing trawler dispute.
Ah, yes, I remember that.
It's a really stark example of how economic control over vital resources can be, weaponized for political leverage. And it's not just minerals on land. There are growing concerns about China using its huge long-distance fishing fleet for maybe aggressive actions or intelligence gathering. It mirrors tactics they've already used in the South China Sea, where paramilitary guys can be disguised as fishermen. The RAND report even mentions that container ship, the Hong Kong-registered new polar bear, and the damage it likely caused to an undersea cable. Could that be an example of targeted disruption? Maybe even sabotage. These aren't just commercial deals, they're strategic footholds. Imagine like a seemingly innocent mining investment that suddenly, in a crisis, could become a military choke point or give them intelligence on critical infrastructure nearby.
That's definitely concerning. So what are the Arctic nations actually doing? Are they pushing back against these subtle but significant strategic moves?
Yeah, they are starting to. Across the Arctic nations, you look at Denmark with its 2021 Investment Screening Act, Canada's 2022 Investment Canada Act, focusing hard on critical minerals, even various EU members. There's a clear pattern emerging. They're putting in stricter investment screening. The goal is to limit Chinese economic penetration that might have these dual-use implications. Norway, for example, plans to nationalize its gas pipelines by 2028. These are pretty decisive moves to protect their own economic security and critical infrastructure. Okay, next up in RAND's broke down, observing and learning. They call it knowledge development. China's scientific interest in the Arctic, it goes back to the mid-90s. Strong focus on scientific bases, observation sites, including space tracking stations and lots of underwater sensing and mapping. What's the hidden risk here for, say, the U.S.? The risk is significant, really, because civilian research in these critical environments can so easily have dual-use applications. Think about it. Underwater sensors designed for, benign ocean research, they can actually serve non-scientific functions, like monitoring U.S. submarines or mapping the seabed for military advantage.
Yeah.
Canada found Chinese monitoring buoys in the Arctic back in 2022 that could have been doing exactly that.
Wow.
And what's kind of fascinating, China publicly announced in July 2023 that they successfully tested a listening device for large-scale deployment in the Arctic. That raises even more concerns about tracking American and Allied subs. It feels eerily like old Cold War tactics, doesn't it?
It really does. So if civilian research can be this double-edged sword, what concrete steps are allies taking? Are they, getting wise to this blurring of lines quickly enough?
They are getting wiser, yes. Any increase in activity that lets China gain knowledge or sort of alter the Arctic operating environment, especially stuff directly linked to the Chinese state, like through ownership or use of research facilities or sensors, that's a major red flag now. So you see Sweden and Finland, for instance, they've both ended agreements with China about satellite ground monitoring stations. Why? Military and intelligence gathering concerns. Finland also blocked China trying to buy or lease an airport near a military base. These actions show a growing awareness of the strategic game being played.
Okay, Randy's third category, facilitating access. This covers China's interest in developing ports, railways, roads, and, building more icebreakers. What vulnerabilities pop up when a foreign power gets control or major influence over critical infrastructure like that?
Well, owning or building critical infrastructure gives China access to sensitive design details, operational information. This can create really significant vulnerabilities for a nation's infrastructure and its supply chains. Think about Hutchison Ports operating at Stockholm Norvik Port, or China's interest in that Arctic Corridor Railway project. These aren't just about commerce. They provide strategic footholds that could be exploited in a crisis, giving a potential adversary vital access and intel.
Have any big projects like these actually been blocked by countries in the region?
Oh, yes, definitely. Estonia, for one, blocked a Chinese proposal for an undersea tunnel connecting Helsinki and Tallinn. They cited economic, environmental, and, importantly, clear security reasons. The threat signals here are pretty clear. Any Chinese economic activity that looks unprofitable, but they keep pushing it, like trying to buy land near sensitive sites, or keeping uneconomic mines open that might be more about gaining access and influence than profit. And look, any agreements allowing Chinese military aircraft, ships, or subs to use Arctic airports or ports, or placing underwater sensors near those ports, that would be a huge signal of escalating strategic intent.
Okay, fourth category. Transmitting data and information. This is where China's Polar Silk Road meets its digital Silk Road, right?
Right.
Their involvement in undersea cables, connected services like smart cities or safe cities, 5G, satellites, server farms. This feels like maybe the most, pervasive threat, given how much we rely on digital connections.
It really is pervasive. Think about undersea cables. They carry something like 95% of all intercontinental data. That includes vital financial info, military communications. Historically, U.S. tech companies controlled most of these networks, but Chinese companies are rapidly increasing their involvement. Now, why is that concerning? Because Chinese legislation, like their national intelligence law, could legally mandate data access if a cable lands in China.
Wow.
And remember, the new polar bear incident, damaging that undersea cable, it highlights not just potential disruption, but also the risk of intelligence collection. And then there's LoJink, China's national public information platform for transportation and logistics. This thing aggregates vast amounts of global logistics data.
LoJink, right. I've heard warnings about that.
Yeah, the U.S.-China Economic and Security Review Commission, USCC, warned that LoJink could give Beijing just unparalleled real-time insights into global trade patterns, supply chains. Imagine knowing exactly what's moving where, globally. It's a massive economic and potential military intelligence advantage.
And 5G, that's been a huge flashpoint globally.
Absolutely. Huawei and ZTE pushed 5G very aggressively worldwide. China held, 36% of 5G standard essential patents back in 2019. But due to intense pressure from the U.S. and allies, most NATO Arctic countries, Iceland, as the notable exception, they've chosen non-Chinese providers like Ericsson and Nokia. Countries like Canada, Norway, Sweden, they've even mandated removing Chinese equipment from their networks. They cite serious security concerns, potential intelligence gathering under that national intelligence law we mentioned, which basically forces Chinese firms to help state intelligence.
Which raises the question, what about cooperation between adversaries like China and Russia in this digital space?
Good point. Yeah. Russia hasn't just welcomed Huawei for 5G. They cooperate closely with Beijing on both 5G and satellite tech. And this cooperation has real, direct impacts. Especially for the war in Ukraine, it helps Russia with military logistics, reconnaissance, drone deployment. Plus, China's satellites in polar orbits, they're ground stations. They could be strategically used for intel gathering against Western satellites, aircraft, submarines. They could potentially disrupt critical infrastructure. I mean, a Chinese company was found selling high-res observation satellites to the Wagner Group.
Unbelievable.
Yeah. So, threat signals here. Any weakening of U.S. influence blocking Chinese involvement in critical undersea cable projects. Or China forming consortia with adversaries like Russia and Iran. Also, more cyber vulnerabilities traced to Chinese actors exploiting things like smart city tech. All very alarming signs.
Okay, that covers the Arctic pretty thoroughly. But China's ambition, as you said, isn't just limited to the north. There's this whole new frontier emerging deep under the waves where the race for the next generation of critical resources is already on. Deep sea mining and critical minerals. Why is this becoming so strategically important right now?
Well, simply put, land-based resources are running out, especially with the massive global demand surge for things like electric vehicles and green energy tech. The oceans, though, hold these truly vast, untapped reserves. Picture this. Potato-sized rocks scattered across the deep ocean floor. But they're not just rocks. These polymetallic nodules, especially in the Clarion-Clipperton zone, the CCZ, they're packed with cobalt, manganese, copper, nickel, the exact minerals you need for EV batteries, solar panels, wind turbines.
Wow.
That zone alone might hold 5 to 10 times more of these vital resources than all known land-based reserves combined. It's an enormous, strategically critical resource waiting down there.
Okay, here's where it gets really interesting. Given that huge potential, what's the competitive landscape look like? Who's actually in the lead to, grab these deep sea minerals?
China. China has a significant and, frankly, maybe unsettling lead. Over the last 15 years or so, they've positioned themselves incredibly well. They've aggressively secured access to critical minerals by owning foreign mines, yes. But crucially, they dominate the global processing industry. They control maybe 48% of global nickel processing, 47% of cobalt processing, even though they don't have huge domestic reserves of the raw stuff. And when you look at the International Seabed Authority, the ISA, that's the body governing mining in international waters, China holds 5 of the 31 exploration contracts. And they were the first country to get contracts for all 3 main types of deep-sea minerals.
And how does the U.S. stack up in this critical race?
Well, U.S. entities, they currently hold 0 ISA contracts. Zero. Yep. The U.S. actually hasn't ratified the UN Convention on the Law of the Sea, UNCLS. That's the big international treaty for the oceans. And a key reason is disagreement over how the ISA controls mining royalties and contracting. So what that means, crucially, is the U.S. doesn't have a formal vote, a formal seat at the table in shaping the rules for deep-sea mining going forward. That potentially ceds a lot of influence to others, like China. Now, the U.S. has declared the limits of its own extended continental shelf, and that area might hold viable deep-sea deposits. But this whole endeavor also brings up huge environmental questions.
Right. The environmental impact must be a major concern.
Absolutely. Deep-sea mining could drastically alter the seabed, destroy unique habitats that took millennia to form, create noise pollution, stir up sediment plumes that change water temperature, salinity, impacting fragile ecosystems we barely understand. So robust environmental monitoring plans are just crucial. Non-negotiable, really.
So how does China view this deep-sea frontier strategically? Is it just about getting the raw materials?
Oh, it's far more than that. China's long-term strategy, they formalized it back in 2012, is to become a maritime great power. This whole blue economy strategy, it's backed by massive coordinated investments in deep-sea research and tech. Think of their Geolong submersible doing successful sea trials. It's a concerted push across the board. Public sector, private sector, universities, research institutes, state-owned enterprises, SOEs. It's kind of a many bets approach, like they did with EVs, where state subsidies encourage lots of competition and innovation. But what's really concerning, and a core part of their strategy, is this military-civil fusion, the overlap between deep-sea mining entities and affiliates of the People's Liberation Army, the PLA.
Military-civil fusion, right. That sounds deliberate.
It is deliberate. It's a national strategy in China. It essentially mandates that private companies, civilian research, they have to contribute directly to military goals. So, for instance, the China State shipbuilding corporation, CSSC. They build aircraft carriers, and they build deep-sea mining research vessels. See the connection? PLA-linked entities get bigger subsidies, less scrutiny. They can take more risks on projects that ultimately serve military ends. Plus, China often builds extensive overseas infrastructure airports alongside its mining operations. That infrastructure could potentially support future plan, that's the PLA Navy, base expansion down the road.
Okay, let's connect these dots. What does all this mean for you, the listener, and for the bigger strategic picture? How do these activities in the Arctic and the deep ocean tie together?
When you put it all together, China's dominance in critical mineral supply chains, both on land and potentially at sea, creates a really severe vulnerability for the U.S. economy. We saw a preview when Beijing restricted exports of gallium and germanium. So deep-sea minerals aren't just resources, they're a potential strategic hedge against worsening U.S.-China relations. This also impacts our maritime capabilities. The U.S. relies heavily on foreign shipping. Less than 2% of our trade is carried on U.S.-flagged ships. Many U.S. imports arrive on Chinese vessels.
Less than 2%? That's staggering.
It is. And then there's Lojink, that Chinese logistics data platform we talked about. The potential for Beijing to have unmatched, real-time insights into global trade. It's a profound economic and potential military intelligence advantage. This whole situation, it really echoes territorial disputes we've seen elsewhere, doesn't it?
It absolutely does. The parallels seem quite clear.
Yeah, think about the South China Sea. Legal frameworks for deep-sea mining there are basically gridlocked, hamstrung by territorial disputes. And what happens? It can lead to unilateral exploitation, increased geopolitical tension. It's really a cautionary tale for other contested maritime areas, which leads to a key point. America's traditional approach to getting resources mostly hands-off, let the private sector handle it, assume the sea lanes will always be open, that sort of laissez-faire strategy. It's just not enough anymore in today's geopolitical climate. There's an urgent, undeniable need for a coherent U.S. strategy that has to include strong government support for domestic deep-sea mineral extraction and processing. This isn't just economics, it's about national security, economic independence.
That's a really comprehensive look at China's strategy, weaving together economic, scientific, and, yes, military goals across critical areas like the Arctic and these new deep-sea frontiers. It's pretty clear the U.S. and its allies are facing some significant immediate challenges in securing vital resources and maintaining that maritime dominance, which has been fundamental to our security for so long.
The strategic imperative for the U.S. couldn't be clearer, really. We have to proactively secure our supply chains. We need to leverage our own exclusive economic zone and those of our strategic partners. And we absolutely must invest significantly in domestic processing capabilities for these deep-sea minerals to counter China's growing influence. Our national security really depends on it.
So here's a final thought for you to consider. If the U.S. Navy finds itself unable to fully guarantee that traditional role protecting friendly access to the global commons, while also being able to disrupt an adversary then relying on a laissez-faire resource strategy, that almost certainly becomes a profound, serious vulnerability. What does that truly mean for our economic security in a world where maritime dominance and easy access to vital resources is no longer a given?